this special afternoon of celebration of the life and career of a man who changed forever the face of dance in Canada. Hello, my name is Max Wyman. I wrote about David most of his life. I'm privileged to be standing next to one of the great luminaries of dance in Canada, the distinguished ballerina Evelyn Hart. Evelyn,
it's fantastic for me to be able to be here to share with you, with all of his friends, and with you, the audience, this wonderful man's life.
Now, I should tell you, this is not meant to be a big, finished production. You didn't pay for the tickets, so that's okay.
You get what you pay for.
It's more like, you know, Mickey and Judy putting on a show. A gang of us got together and said, well, we've got to send David off in style, so that's what we're doing. We've even borrowed our set. This is a set from the Playhouse production of Tosca Cafe, which is a really interesting piece of dance, music, theatre that David will have loved.
It's a really fully packed evening with lots of friends and clips and performances. And so Max and I, being your hosts, are going to have to keep things moving along. So we actually have a hook, and I actually have a humazoo. In case people, so if you hear that, you know what's going on.
How did you meet him?
You know, my very first performance as a principal dancer was here in Vancouver. I debuted in Nutcracker. That was actually the review that Max wrote saying that here's a dancer to watch for. I still remember this day. I was thinking about that as I walked past the Sandman Inn, right across the street from the Queen Elizabeth Theatre. And I met David at a reception afterwards. And I remember thinking my partner, one of my friends, David Peregrine, looked, he says, do you know who that is that you're going to meet? I said, who? He says, David Y.H. Louis. And I said, David Y.H. Louis? He said, yes. So obviously David's reputation had preceded him as the greatest sort of impresario and very important man to know. Anyway, I met him. He seemed to be very impressive to me. He looked me up and down and said, but darling, where are your rings? So I wore a few for him today. But he, of all people, understood that if I was going to be a star, I had to dress like one.
I met David when he first came when he was put on his first show, the Pakavali Dancers of Thailand. And he came to me, I was writing at the Sun, and said, could I please do a little bit of pre-publicity for him? So I did that, and I actually reviewed the show, and I think I reviewed everything else he put on for the rest of his life. There's a big secret about what Y.H. means. Do you know?
I have no idea. I thought you knew.
No. He told me that it means center of the universe in Chinese, and I think he was putting it right.
Actually, I have to admit that before this morning, I wouldn't have been able to tell you, but I did find out, and you will find out by the end of this performance today,
but it's
what
not,
it does mean. But it's not, Your Highness.
Don't.
That's safe for me.
Do you use Facebook? Who uses Facebook? Yeah? Lots of people. I was on Facebook the other day, and David's name came up in that Friends Online column on the side. And I was curious, so I called it up. And Facebook said, David is unavailable, but you can still send him a message. Wonders of social media. Well, we're here to send him a message this afternoon. A message of celebration of a remarkable life in the arts, a life of influence and involvement that touched multitudes, touched all of us, and touched many more.
You know, and many of those multitudes were connected to the world of dance, you know, choreographers, performers, artistic directors, and of course, you, the audience. That was how I knew him, was as a supporter of the arts. And for me, his support was, he never rarely ever would comment on a performance, but his greatest compliment would always be the fact that he would bring people back to meet me, bring people to the theater, get them to come. And every time he came, there was a new person there to see the arts and proliferate and to understand and participate in the joy of arts. He also was a very quiet man, and for my point of view, we would spend most of the time thinking and plotting and chatting about the state of art, the state of my career, state of non-state of my career, things that we could do, ideas, and it was really that sense. He was a dreamer, and it was a joy to be able to dream with him.
Talking about your career, he used to phone me and say, "What are we going to do about Miss Hart?"
Or Madam, as I was called to him.
Now, David knew that image counted in a great deal in the world in which he moved. And at the Speak Years, he emulated the great Sol Hurok and Serge Diaghilev, those great impresarios with their big capes, and he wore an impressive flowing cape, and there it is, right there, on the mannequin, beside the jukebox.
Elegant.
Elegant. But it all started in the humblest of ways. And we're going to start today's celebration with a segment we've titled The Boy Impresario, which is a title the media gave him very early on in his career. Here's David talking about how it all began.
I was at the university doing special events, and I just happened to meet up with some people who were involved in the production of Take Me Along, and I kept going to the Mussock Green Room up in the auditorium because I needed a place to eat my lunch. And I was always fascinated with being around theater productions and musicals in particular, and so I just hung around, and I happened to play the violin, so I played in the orchestra for the first year, and then I started to produce the shows, and so I got very involved in it. The reason the Half-Assed Follies came together was that at that point we had done, each year we had done one great big musical, and there seemed to be a particular group of people at the time who were very anxious to do more than just one musical a year. And instead of going to university majoring in English, it came to a point, I think it was October, and it was because of the open house that they have at UBC, and Mussock decided they wanted to do something, so we decided we would produce a review. And I think Ed Astley and myself put together this review where we stole all the material from everywhere in every possible shape and size and got all the kids together and put on a show. The first show I did was Take Me Along, and Sue Gibson, who is now Pat Rose's wife, was designing the set for this show. And at a dress rehearsal, while the orchestra was all sitting in the orchestra pit, the entire front curtain fell from the wings, proceeded to fall over on top of the orchestra. And I remember thinking at the time that this was it. And the only thing I could think about was saving my violin. So I just, saved my violin and got beamed on the head by all this canvas and wood. The most important aspect of Mussock that contributed to me was it gave me an opportunity to do things that I wouldn't normally get a chance to do. Like, Mussock is where I learned how to be a producer of musical theater. Mussock was a place where I could utilize a lot of, or learn about publicity and what you had to do to publicize something. It gave me a place to try out a lot of things at a time which I didn't really know a lot about what I was doing, and so I learned with the experience of Mussock. I mean, the experience was the most important thing.
Well, from humble beginnings. Here's one of David's first collaborators, Peter Cowley, to talk about those early years. Peter?
I saw David for the last time on my 60th birthday party 3 years ago. He made a grand entrance, and although only a few of the guests knew who he was, a reception line soon formed, and each one eagerly anticipated a shake of the imperial hand. As my dear grandma said many years earlier, now there's a young man with presence. During the party, we took up as if we'd never been apart, and of course we reminisced. We met in the middle 60s when we both worked at Kelly's record store up the street, and a few years later I stopped by his UBC office. He was at that time president of the Student Union's events committee, just to say hello. He greeted me with about 12 seconds of small talk and then launched into a sales pitch. If I put up just $500, I could be part of a concert promotion company he is forming. He had room for just 4 more investors, and he wanted me to be one of them. I was in. And so at 8 p.m. on February 16th, 1970, a fair-sized audience next door welcomed the Pachelbel dancers of Thailand, and we were hooked. But with very little money and even less credibility with the major booking agents, we needed help, and we turned to Ariel Rubinstein, a classical pianist and, more importantly, a well-known and respected impresario in Portland, Oregon. Ariel invited us to his lovely home for lunch. We could talk afterwards. But shortly after David began the pitch, we noticed that Ariel had apparently fallen asleep. There was nothing to do but keep going. And once David finished, silence. Ariel finally raised his head, looked at us sternly, and said, "You will go broke." Silence. But he said, "You'll do this anyway, so let's get to work." And we did. There are great stories behind the visits of many performers and dance companies we hosted, but here's just one. We were presenting the organist Virgil Fox for the first time, and he asked if we could arrange a visit to the Sabateel harpsichord factory here in the city. After the visit, we could go directly to the theater. Dr. Fox only rehearsed past midnight. The evening came and we fetched Fox and a friend's rolls. Upon arrival at Sabateel, I worried out loud about the car being stolen, but David, completely immersed in his role for the evening, said, "Never mind that, dear boy, find us the door." Magic followed. Fox played beautiful music on 2 finished instruments and discussed details of the manufacture with members of the Sabateel family. And then to the theater. With only work lights on, both sides of the bare stage stacked with speakers, and the mighty Rogers touring organ just stage right of center, Fox made his entrance just after 12. There were only a handful of us in the house when Fox called out for paper towels to clean the keys, and someone scurried off to find some, never to return. Fox grew impatient and simply removed his trousers and then his underpants, which he used to polish the keys. Mission accomplished. Then he hit the pedals and produced sounds of such magnitude that dust and bits of plaster began falling from the ceiling backstage, and of such magnificence that we were all, then and there, in his thrall. Just a couple more days from the life of David Y.H. Louis. On with the show.
Thank you, Peter. The second show that was staged by that fledgling group of concert promoters was a revue called Now Mercutio. It was written by Bill Willard, who went on to become the venerable and much-loved artistic director of the Arts Club Theatre Complex. Here's Bill to pick up the story.
Well, I don't know if anybody here remembers Now Mercutio because you didn't attend it. It was a monumental flop. And I was surprised that David continued to talk to me after that, but indeed he did. It was, I like to say, I co-wrote it with Daphne Goldberg, and I like to say we were ahead of our times, and I'm not sure they've arrived yet. However, I knew David Y.H. Louis when he was David Louis, and he... and you could actually say, "Hi, David," as opposed to "Sir." And he engaged me. I went to the National Theatre School after graduating from UBC, so I didn't know David during the Mushog years that he referred to. But I came back to Vancouver, actually working here as a stage manager, and he engaged me to direct West Side Story for Mushog, which is, I suppose, fitting with West Side Story next door. And of course, that's when I really discovered David had producer genes and really respected how he handled this massive cast of young people. He told me that the Jets and the Sharks could never see each other. They always had to remain in separate rooms. It didn't matter if they were dating, that was a bit of a problem that one had to deal with. Anyways, David, of course, went on and had an illustrious career as a theatre producer in the 1970s. And I'm thrilled to bring on 4 of those wonderful, wonderful talents that he employed, and I, like many of you, shared in their great talent. So please welcome Pat Rose, Leon Bibb, Jeff Hyssop, and Ruth Nicol. David did learn to produce, and he learned to produce musicals, theater pieces that he loved. And I'm sure his training at Montauk told him, yes, you have to sell tickets. But first, you have to get a venue. And one of the venues he used, and it shows his imagination, was Christchurch Cathedral, where he presented Godspell in 1974. And we're very pleased to have Jeff Hislop, who was the star of that show back then, recreating All for the Best from that show. Jeff?
Thank you, it's so great to be here. I'm still here. I can't believe it. I just done the movie of Jesus Christ Superstar, and we filmed it in Israel in '72. So I was on my biblical role at that time, and we came to Vancouver because I don't remember how I got the part, but I do remember one day we were rehearsing. Richard Azunian directed it, and we were doing By My Side, and the cast was positioned there, and I was downstage right here, and they were singing to me, and it was very powerful, and I was having a moment, and tears came to my eyes, and Richard and the cast, it was a galvanizing moment in rehearsal. So he ran to David and said, wait till you see, we've got this, he just waxed eloquently. And the next day, David deemed to come into rehearsal, and he swept in and he sat down, and we did the same thing. Of course, second time around, you know, and we did the same moment, and he said, well, you're not going to do it like that, are you? So that was my one remembrance from that. This number is a duet. So I have to call upon my cast and my audience here. There's a rhythm in this that I think we could just practice. So take your programs off your laps, and it goes like this. That's wonderful.
Evelyn does it best.
So I have to be careful. So it comes up very quickly in the song. So be ready, okay? Angus, would you mind? When you feel sad or under a curse, your life is bad, your prospects are worse, your wife is crying, sighing, and your olive tree is dying, temples are graying, teeth are decaying, creditors weighing your purse. Your mood and your robe are both at blue. You bet that Job had nothing on you. Don't forget that when you go to heaven, you'll be blessed. Yes, it's all for the best. Some men are born to live at ease, doing what they please, richer than the bees are in honey. Never growing old, never feeling cold, calling posts of gold from thin air. The best in every town, best at shaking down, best at making mountains of money. They can't take it with them, so what do they care? They get the center of the beat, cushions on the seat, houses on the street where it's sunny. Showers by the sea, windows warm and free, all of this, and we get the rest. Who is the land for, the sun and the sand for? You guessed, it's all for the, you must never be depressed. Yes, it's all for the, all your wrongs will be regressed. Yes, it's all for the, someone's got to be depressed. Yes, it's all for the best.
Thank you, Jeff. Of course, music and lyrics by Stephen Schwartz, and just acknowledge Agnes Kellett on the piano. So, going back a couple of years, what of course changed the face of theatre in Vancouver? And that was Jacques Brel's Alive and Well Living in Paris. It clearly changed It clearly did a huge, a wonderful boost to the Arts Club on Seymour Street, which is where I started out. And when David brought me the show, and we talked to Richard Azunian about it, and Leon Bibb, who had got involved in bringing the rights to Vancouver, right away, once we assembled this extraordinary cast, the Van Mortifee, Leon, Ruth Nichol, and Pat Rose, we knew this was something that Vancouver had not experienced before in a small theatre, 200-seat theatre, with this extraordinary music and lyrics by Jacques Brel. And so, we're very privileged to have one of the original cast, Ruth Nichol, singing a wonderful song from the show, Sons Up. Ruth? commercial producer David was. He knew a hit when it hit him over the face. We had to remind him a couple of times, David, this is a hit. And he brought in wonderful people like Brent Carver into the production at Seymour Street, which ran 7 months and played with something like 40,000 people. Then he moved it here to the Playhouse, I think the next summer. It traveled to Winnipeg, and now history. But David wasn't content with just doing shows. No, he had to build a theater. And so in 1976, he took what was a store, basically, or maybe it was one of those car repair shops on Richard Street. In those days, Seymour Street and Richard Street had a lot of car repair shops. And he converted it into the David Y.H. Louis Theatre. I asked him if I thought that was a bit much, and he gave me a stare. After that, I learned not to forget Y.H. Anyways, he picked, of course, Stephen Sondheim was a great favorite of all of us working in musical theatre in the 70s. And so he chose that wonderful show, Company, to open the theatre with. It was just a tremendous success. And we are very privileged to have flying in from Toronto, Pat Rose, to sing Being Alive from that show.
David and I actually go back to high school. He went to Kitsilano High, I went to Ordbin. We knew each other a little bit in high school, and then at university, he played in the orchestra in Mussock when I was in some shows. And then as a young man, one night I was in a show in London, England. David showed up at the door and said, let's go for a beer. And he said, I'm going to produce shows. And I said, geez, Dave, hire me. And he said, don't ever call me Dave. Hey, Mr. Louis, can I buy you a beer? So he hired me. We did 3 together, Berlin to Broadway, and this one, Company. And this is from Company. Thanks, Dave. Somebody hold me too close. Somebody hurt me too deep. Somebody sit in my chair and ruin my sleep and make me aware of being alive. Being alive. Somebody know me too much. Somebody know me too well. Somebody pull me up short and give me support and put me through hell for being alive. Make me alive. Make me alive. Make me confused. Mock me with praise. Let me be used. Bury my days alone. Is alone, not alive. Somebody crown me with love. Somebody force me to care. Somebody let me come through. I'll always be there, as frightened as you, to help us survive. Being alive. Being alive. Being
So I would say that not only was Jacques Brel a very, very important theatrical event in the 1970s, but the arrival of Leon Bibb into Vancouver was equally as important. Leon brought his wonderful sense of place to a town, really, the town of Vancouver. And I think when Leon arrived, we started to become a city. And Jacques Brel did that in a certain way, and Leon's presence, in the fact that he had so much to do with bringing the show, the rights to the show to David and then to the Arts Club, was obviously instrumental in helping creating a cultural environment. And later on in 1973, the next year after Brel, David produced another show here at the Playhouse called From Berlin to Broadway, The Music of Kurt Weill. And here to sing September's song from that show is a gentleman who actually knew Kurt Weill, Leon Bibb.
You know, I was sitting backstage and I was listening to all the laughter. And on stage here, you've continued to laugh. I must tell you, I have no joke or no funny story to tell. But I do appreciate David, and I did call him David. I didn't call him Dave. I did appreciate what David did. As Bill said, he not only created Jacques Brel, produced Jacques Brel, but he also produced this song in Berlin. He didn't produce the song, Leon. He produced the show. And the song is from the show. And I'd like to, in front, introduce you to my very good friend, Bill Sample. When I was a young man courting the girls, I played me a waiting game. If a lass refused me with tossing curls, I let the old earth take a couple of twirls, while I wooed her with tears in lieu of pearls. And as time came around, she came my way. As time came around, she came. Oh, it's a long, long time from May to December, and the days grow short till you reach September, and the autumn weather turns the leaves to flame. One hasn't got time for the waiting game. Oh, the days dwindle down to a precious few. September, November, and these few precious days I'll share with you. These golden days I'll share with you. day. Splendid ways of time. Oh, it's a long, long day from May to December, and the days go short till you reach September. The autumn weather turns the leaves to flame. One hasn't got time for the waiting game. When a young man courting the girls, I played the waiting game.
I just really, and I know David is listening, I can hear him, and David did recognize true talent, and that was extraordinary talent, all four of them. So David did go on to produce a couple more shows at the David Y.H. Theater, but he soon discovered as a commercial producer in the 1970s that it's hard to run a 250-seat theater without government subsidies, without donations, without becoming a non-profit society, and that he didn't want to do. He wanted to make sure that he could do it on his terms, in his way. And so eventually he rented the theater out, and of course it then became Sprat's Ark and Richard on Richards and Dust to Dust. So his next adventure, I'll pass it on to Max and Evelyn, as he had many, many more ahead of him. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Leon, and Ruth, Pat, Jeff. These talents that take us back and give us such wonderful remembrances of David's career in musical theatre. But for many people, you know, the first thing they think about when they think about David is dance. And I don't think we can ever overemphasize the importance of his influence on the world of dance in Canada and in Vancouver. For a couple of decades or more, he gave the city a crash course in the best of modern dance and the best of ballet.
You know, I think that's my cue now. I mean, at the word dance. The one thing that I loved about David is that he was an avid balletomane. And sometimes in this day and age, it's not a very popular thing to love ballet as compared to modern dance, but he loved all kinds of dance. You know, whether you're a modern dancer, a ballet dancer, a tap dancer, whatever it is, you want to dance, you want to share, your time is fleeting, but more than that, you need to dance. And what David recognized is that the only way that you can bring that and share those fleeting moments and the things that you work so hard for is to share them with an audience. And he worked tirelessly to be able to do that. I mean, I'm a hopeless businesswoman, a hopeless person at organizing those things, and thank heaven someone like David existed to be able to do that. The other thing that he sort of showed me and taught me, I was doing a gala once that he had organized, and he brought all sorts of different artists together, musicians, singers, dancers. And as a matter of fact, the crew backstage were the ones that night producing the show and working on the show. And I met this amazing artist called Yehudi Menuhin, Sir Yehudi Menuhin. And I remember it changed my life, mostly because when I saw this man, he was about 90 something at that time. And I recognized that in this man was this unique and marvelous passion and spirit and mastery of his art. And what I realized is that in that generation, anyone who was lucky enough to see him would keep that and carry that with them, just like the next generations. And it's one of the things that I think David helped me to understand, was that each artist is unique, and each artist needs to be seen and heard and remembered, and create a relationship with the audience and the people around them, because they do make their lives better. In the world of dance, he created the chance for, say, the National Ballet or the Winnipeg Ballet, the ABT, different dancers to come for everybody to see. Me as a dancer, to be able to come twice a year my entire career to Vancouver and build a relationship with the critics, with the audience, with David, with all the people, with all the young dancers, was a marvelous, marvelous gift. So I'd like to share with you now some clips and some comments from Karen Kane, the National Ballet of Canada's Artistic Director, and Andre Lewis, the Royal Winnipeg Ballet's Artistic Director.
David Y.H. Louis was such a courageous entrepreneur for the arts. In this city, I remember way back when he was not only supporting all the local talent, but he was bringing in the most interesting, exciting artists from everywhere else, so that Vancouverites could appreciate both what they had in their own city and what he could bring in to wow them and show them. He served on the Canada Council. He represented his province for 3 years. He never lost his enthusiasm and his love of the arts. He really gave such service to this city and this province and this country, and he will really be missed.
David was an incredible person. I first met him in the mid-70s when I came to Vancouver with the Royal Winnipeg Ballet as a student, mind you, doing Nutcracker. And what an impression the man made on me. This incredible presence, this incredible care for art, for dance, and his love and passion just exuded from him. And over the years, David and I had the chance to continue that connection as I became a dancer in the company, where he presented us again in Vancouver and also in other BC towns, and also just continued working together after this when I became artistic director with the Royal Winnipeg Ballet. And he never stopped caring, he never stopped being in tune with what was happening. So we are very sorry to see David go. He was a very important part of dance, an important part of art in Vancouver and across Canada.
Now, there was a time in Winnipeg that we kind of wished we had a David Y.H. Louis in Winnipeg to be able to do the same miraculous things. At one point, the only one time that I ever disagreed with him on anything was that at one point we were commiserating and commenting, and I was thinking, you know, instead of creating all these small little companies, let's pool the resources and make one really fabulous company and it tour all across the West and call it, say, Canadian Western Ballet Theatre or something like this. And he looked at me and says, no, I want my own. So of course he set out to do that. And of course he was greatly instrumental in the formulation of Ballet BC. And the first, yes. And of course one of the very first artistic directors of Ballet BC was Annette Paul. She was a dancer with the Royal Swedish Ballet, with the Harkness Ballet, the Le Grand Ballet Canadien, and she came to Vancouver to be the first founding director of Ballet BC. It's gone through its ups and downs. We have also the wonderful artistic director here to speak in a little while. But I'd like to have a few comments from her, and then also following that, Jean Orr, who is a tireless warrior for ballet and dance in Vancouver. She's not sure if she's not the president anymore, but she works with the Vancouver Ballet Society. She was Canada's first Giselle, and she's the same fighting spirit, and she works for Vancouver and for dancers in general. And so I'd like to share these comments with you now.
Dear David, thank you for all the years you brought Le Grand Ballet Canadien from Montreal to Vancouver. That was when I came to know you and we became friends. I was dancing, it was my birthday, and you filled my dressing room with balloons. You arranged a photo call in Stanley Park with the real swans surrounding me, and I was in my Swan Lake tutu. You did everything to get people to come to the theater and share your love for dance. The last time I saw you at Ballet BC's 25th anniversary, a few months ago, I remembered that incredible phone call I received from you early in November in 1985. You said, "Annette, we're starting a new ballet company here in Vancouver, and I'm asking you to become the director. We have no dancers, no studios, and no repertoire, but we booked the Queen Elizabeth Theatre for April, so would you like the job?" I said, "You must be crazy, but I'll try." And the rest is history. You had big dreams and were a great support to me. You pushed to have us dance at Expo 86. We toured the province and came back to the Queen Elizabeth again. We created the first fundraising gala event in Canada that included stars from as far away as Sweden, New York, and St. Petersburg. And the first year we built a repertoire by choreographers John Cranko, Brian McDonald, Reed Anderson, John Butler, David Allen, Petipa, and Sir Frederick Ashton. It was Alexander Grant who convinced Sir Fred that we could do his monotones 1 and 2. Now that Alexander Grant has joined you in the great theatre in the sky, as you call it, I know that you're both watching the angels dance, both there and here. Thank you for all you did, and we shall miss you.
I'm one of the lucky ones who've known David Y.H. Louis for well over 30 years. It was a marvelous meeting for me because David was an impresario and I had been a dancer. And when I first moved to Vancouver, it was so wonderful to have the presence of this marvelous man with so much knowledge, not just about dance, but about everything. I am so enhanced by his knowledge and sharing it with so many of the people that are here today to honor David. This is a celebration of David, and although personally my life has changed since his death because he was such a part of my life from the beginning as we started Ballet British Columbia. But I first met David through the Vancouver Ballet Society when we used to entertain, after the performances, the professional companies he brought in to Vancouver. Then we decided one day, why don't we have a real professional ballet company? We were able to stand in the wings on their 25th anniversary and cheer them on. It was a marvelous experience for David and I. I remember when there was a time when David and I went to a fancy function and he said to me, "Jean, do you think I should wear my cape?" And I said, "Oh, absolutely, David. It's your trademark." So we arrived at this wonderful, elegant party and a friend came up and said, "What are you trying to do, David? Be Diaghilev?" And he said, "No, I'm trying to be David Y.H. Louis."
Another driving force in the Ballet BC story was Patricia Neary, the former star of Balanchine's New York City Ballet. She can't be with us today, but she did send these words and asked me to read them. March 1989. I met the phenomenal David Y.H. Louis. He was passionate about the world of ballet, and we formed a wonderful connection and friendship immediately. Vancouver was so lucky to have him guiding their path in ballet and the arts. David had incredible knowledge of dancers, choreographers, and dance companies. He and Jean Orr supported me through some very difficult times in Vancouver. I was very thankful for their support and help during this time. The last time I saw David was when I came to Vancouver in 2007 to guest teach for Jean Orr. I reunited my friendship with David while I was there during this time, and even though he was already ailing, I found David's wonderful love and enthusiasm for dance had grown even stronger. I feel very blessed to have known David. He was a true, loving, knowledgeable supporter of dance, and he will be greatly missed in the world of dance and the arts. With deepest sympathy, Patricia Leary. And now here is the current artistic director of the company, Emily Molnar, to talk about Ballet BC as it is today, and to introduce a performance by one of her dancers. Emily.
What a remarkable gathering for a remarkable man. I'm learning an incredible amount about David that I had no idea. It's very, very special. There's no disputing that David's influence on the arts community in Vancouver and Canada was and continues to be tremendous. Within minutes of being in his presence, one could sense David's passion for the creative spirit, for his respect for the realization of the ideas that move and shape us, as well as his desire to encourage change in the world. He was a visionary and a leader. One of David's passions, as we're seeing now, is dance, and was dance for an enormous part of his life. He dedicated an enormous amount of hard work and vision. As a result of his foresight and perseverance, today Vancouver boasts a thriving dance community and one of the country's leading ballet companies, Ballet BC. As a co-founder of Ballet BC, David's ability to see that our city needed a world-renowned resident ballet company in order to create a thriving arts community is something that we will be forever grateful to him for. Over the past 26 years, David was instrumental in the development of Ballet BC, creating the Dance Alive series, as well as acting as an advisor and support to the artists and the leadership of the company. Personally, as a dancer, as well as now in my position as artistic director, David's courage, his incredible honesty, and his intelligence have been a source of guidance and inspiration. He was always able to see right through to the heart of something, and I have such a tremendous amount of respect, and I wish I had had more time to get to know David and to really get to the heart of what his knowledge was, and just being able to share those few moments near the end of his life as an artistic director and to hear his guidance was absolutely phenomenal and something I will cherish forever. David, thank you for all you created and you shared, and for the artistic legacy that will continue beyond today. Thank you for reminding us never to settle for less than greatness. Your passion and vision are alive all around us in this beautiful city. You will never be forgotten, and you will be greatly missed. In celebration of David's life and his profound influence on dance, please welcome Ballet BC dancer Maggie Forgeron and Margie Gillis' Moon on White Crow.
just not the perfect example of what makes the flesh into something totally spiritual. I don't know what is. I think that's what David really truly understood, is that dance doesn't need any more words. Unfortunately, I have to speak a few more. Of course, talking about David being really, really knowledgeable, I just want to, just a little bit of background. He used to come back to me and say, you know when you go from that spinny thing? Or the twiddly-doo? Just a little bit of it. Anyway, of course, at one point too, I was dancing in Alberta Ballet's Nutcracker, and he came back to me and I said, well, how was it? How do you think? He said, it's okay. I said, what do you mean, just okay? He says, I want my own. So of course, his influence wasn't just limited to bringing in companies and other people. It was on inspiring the local community and the people here and the talent here to create things to make Vancouver have their own base of cultural, spectacular, what would I say, wealth. So here is Chen Hongo of the Go Ballet, a good friend and colleague of mine, to speak about that.
Hello, thank you, Evelyn. Well, growing up in Vancouver in the 70s and 80s, I was a little Chinese girl with a big dream of becoming a ballerina. Several times a year, I would attend student matinees at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre, and these performances fueled my passion for dance. They inspired me, and they kept my dream alive. It was only after several performances that I noticed, although the dancers were different, the companies were new, there was one thing that stayed the same. David Y.H. Louis presents. To a 10-year-old, who is David Y.H. Louis? I have no doubt that through his presentations, I was influenced by greatness. Great artists like Evelyn, my very favorite. I did not get to be formally introduced to David until I was principal dancer on tour with the National Ballet of Canada in Vancouver in the 90s. This time, the performance was no longer David Y.H. Louis Presents, but there was David in person shaking my hand and offering words of encouragement in his very special way. I share this story because I hold such a strong sense of admiration for David, the person, the impresario, my friend and my mentor. I got to know David a lot better just before I retired from the stage. David said, Vancouver needs a nutcracker to call its own. When a mutual friend of ours, Anna Marie Holmes, came to teach a summer intensive at the Go Ballet, he said to her, Vancouver needs a nutcracker to call its own, and you should choreograph it. I wonder if he thought we would take him seriously. With our production of the Nutcracker, it has allowed countless young dancers like the one that you are about to see realize their true potential. They share the stage with world-class professionals, perform to live music, and create unforgettable experiences for all that attend. After the premiere, David said to me, what are we going to do next? And my quick response was, David, let me pay off this one first. In all seriousness, thank you, David. Thank you for touching the artistic pulse in this beautiful city for people of all ages. I want to say, give me a sign and we'll get started on the next one. Ladies and gentlemen, It is now my pleasure to introduce to you Yoshiko, who is 15, and Tyler, 17. They will perform the Snow Pas de Deux from The Nutcracker, choreographed by Anna Marie Holmes, who sends her regrets today for not being here in the audience. And this is in memory of David Y.H. Louis Presents. Thank you.
smiling. Are they not incredible? Wow. Isn't that amazing? And now you know that the future is assured, which is great. Thank you, Yoshiko and Tyler, that's amazing. I also have to say, you know, it's the one good thing about ballet is you get to wear a lot of sparkle. Of course, if it isn't enough to have the Nutcracker and Ballet BC and bring in ballet companies, David was also a major instigator in the Scotiabank Dance Centre, which is a home for all forms of dance and all independent dance artists. And I'd like to introduce you now to speak about that is Myrna Zegnar, the Executive Director of the Scotiabank Dance Centre.
I first heard of David some 20 years ago. I have to correct myself, almost 30. Even before I came to Vancouver. And then he was on the hiring committee and the person who asked the most peculiar, one could say somewhat even outrageous questions. I want you to imagine what. Moving on, he was on both boards that I have been working with since joining the dance center almost 15 years ago. During these times, we would meet at least twice a month, and sometimes it was also daily by email, phone, in person. There was always something that David wanted to discuss, learn more about, question, propose. Did I hear something? And he was always on the go to the next project. I think you all know that. In time, and as we got to know each other better, through the many projects that David was involved in, and many of those were with the Dance Center, I got to know him as a person who cared deeply and profoundly about arts and culture, and above all, for dance. He may have preferred ballet over all other dance forms, but in essence, he really only cared about talent, excellence, and how to bring the very best to as many an audience. Each day at the Dance Center, I'm reminded through many little details about how much David cared for that final touch that made things spectacular and meaningful, and how much also he liked to connect people. He was a great connector. Little details. The wood floor, those who are in dance can relate to that we have today at the Dance Center. The glass canopy, or as he would call it, the jewel in the crown. Surely you can't have a building without that. The garden, or the David Y.H and Friends patio, as it's called these days. He carried endless fundraisers to have these in place, and he got all his friends to work very hard so he could deliver this. I'm sure many of you here remember that as well. And to date, I still am reminded of many promises. I'm still learning what promises those were to the friends that got involved. I'll try not to be in the office tomorrow. He had many dreams, and he truly felt that they were all achievable. We will miss him, I will miss him, telling us what we should be doing, but at the same time being interested, truly, in what it is we would like to do. His encouragement was always to dream big, and he has left us with a legacy that today sees the Dance Center a vital part of Vancouver's cultural landscape. One that brings diversity of dance expressions to the forefront of Vancouver's cultural offerings, and contributing to put Vancouver on the world map of dance, in addition to supporting talents through programming unparalleled in Canadian dance today. One such of Vancouver's treasures that we often see at the Dance Center is certainly the next person I'm to introduce, Wen Wei Wong, who through his own work brings together the traditions of ballet and that of contemporary dance, and does it all so well, just as David would have it. Please welcome Wen Wang.
just beautiful. I was going to say, from one dying swan to another, I salute you. And also, I want you to know that if Dave was here and he would look at that and he'd say, that would be fabulous for a gala, he would call you and he would say, Wen, are you up for the dead duck? He'd always say, Madam, it's time to bring out the dead duck. We're still not quite done with dance. His influence was felt everywhere. And here's Sass Sellefjord, Executive Director of Vancouver Tap Dance Society, to shed a little more light on that.
Thank you. David loved tap dancing. And the tap community, the Vancouver Tap Society, and myself will be eternally grateful. I met David 10 years ago, somewhat new to the inner workings of the dance community. And I recall someone telling me, did you know that David Y.H. loves tap dance? You should connect with him. I called him 10 years ago. We met for lunch at English Bay. I remember being so nervous, and David was so gracious. Over lunch, he shared his love for tap, the legends, the musicals that he admired, and it gave me an opportunity to share with him the very humble beginnings of the Vancouver Tap Dance Society. I was so taken with his love for the art form. I encouraged him. I said, I know you spearhead a lot of special events, and any time you would like tap dance to be present, just give us a call. Well, for years, David called. Many, many times he called. And when David called, we showed up, and we tapped. He had an appreciation for talent. He knew that with talent and technical prowess, that you could make magic out of a shuffle, hop, and a flap. In 2009, the community was fortunate to host the inaugural Tap Rising Canadian and Tap Conference. And who was the person first to show up, spend 2 full days with 65 leaders in the tap community was David. He shared his wit. You know that razor-sharp lens of his? And there was always that cut-to-the-chase observation that he just felt he had to share with you. It was shortly after that conference that David had his 65th birthday, and he invited again tap dance. And so the shuffle, the hop, the flap said, "Happy birthday, David." Then it was 8 months ago, he recommitted again to the tap community. Our studio on the east side of Vancouver was up for sale, and it's a home that we had leased for 12 years. We couldn't bear the thought of losing that home. So we decided we'd buy it, $925,000 building with no money. We went to the bankers, and the bankers listened. They wanted to know about budgets and campaigns and strategies. But foremost, they wanted to know who was on your committee. Did you have any movers? Did you have any shakers? We met in the lobby at the bank and we said, we've got to get some leaders from the tap community. And you guessed it, the first person who joined the building and steering committee was David Y.H. We were desperate for leaders to join our cause. I'm pleased to say we did take possession of that lovely little studio September 1st, and we announced it at our opening of our TAP Festival. And David joined us to raise a glass and celebrate. He was really proud that we had made this accomplishment. As he was leaving, he said to me, he took my hand, and he said, "Sass, it has just begun." He said, "You have a lot of work ahead of you." He said, "You're going to have challenges and you're going to have competing decisions." And he said, "You must never, ever feel the pressure." He said, "Do not make any rash decisions." He said, "I have lots to tell you, and I look forward to lunch after the festival." I never did get to have lunch with them. But you know, the next day, he came to the opening performance right here in this theater on September the 2nd. And I don't know, but I'm going to guess that it might have been the last presentation David saw. And I will say this, that he saw the best the tap community had to offer. And although I never did get to have that lunch with David, we will always benefit from his insightful vision, his ongoing support to the community, the Vancouver Tap Society, and to me personally. And as the community enhances its permanent home, we'll remember those words, David. We will not make any rash decisions. And ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to bring to the stage 2 young rising artists in our tap community, Alex Clancy and Mackenzie Cardwell. And David, this shuffle, hop, and flap is for you.
A one, two, three.
Somewhere in between the successes, David underwent 2 major bouts of open heart surgery. It might have stopped a mere mortal, but not David Y.H. Louis, impresario.
I guess I'm a you know, I was put on this earth to be here, to do something, and I'm going to stay here and do it. I mean, I'm not going to go away.
And he didn't. He was a man of many interests, many influences, and a great determination. And the things that he was put here to do, they ranged across the entire community, locally and nationally. He was a member of the board of the Canada Council, as Karen mentioned. He was a member of the BC Arts Council. and he's quite rightly been celebrated in many, many ways. Culminating in his appointment to the membership of the Order of Canada, a lapel pin that he wore with great pride. He was rightly proud of that. Here's a letter from the Governor General, which David's family has kindly allowed us to share.
Dear members of the family of David Louis, my wife and I are deeply saddened to hear of your loss. Our country has lost a great Canadian in David Louis. He will long be remembered for his contributions to the performing arts in Vancouver. He leaves a truly inspiring legacy of outstanding service and achievement and will be greatly missed by all those whose lives he touched. Please take comfort in knowing that all the members of the Order of Canada join me in this offering our condolences. May good memories sustain you through this time. With deepest sympathy, David Johnson. And on Thursday this week, one of David's great supporters over the years, his Member of Parliament, Hetty Fry, had this to say in the House of Commons.
Member for Vancouver Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to pay tribute to a cultural icon in Vancouver, David Y.H. Louis, who passed away last month. David was a BC boy. Born in Vancouver in 1944, David attended Kitsilano High School and later UBC. From a young age, David was interested in ballet, but it was in university where that interest really took hold. The man with the flowing cape, as he was known, made Vancouver a destination for world-class artists. His David Y.H. Louis Dance Spectacular series brought artists like Martha Graham, Alvin Ailey, the Joffrey Ballet, and Shirley MacLaine to Vancouver. David was at the head of the arts community, a prominent member for more than 40 years. He built the David Y.H. Louis Theatre in 1975, co-founded Ballet BC, BC Arts Council, and was board member of the Canada Council, where he pushed for a multicultural art scene. Canada's artistic community has not only lost a great visionary and advocate, but a dear friend. On behalf of the Liberal Party of Canada, I offer sincere condolences to David's friends and family. A celebration of David's life will be held at the Playhouse on October the 23rd in Vancouver.
The Honourable Member for West Vancouver.
To put more of a personal spin on all this acclaim, I'd like to welcome one of David's oldest friends, and I use this advisedly, Norman Yard. Norman is a Professor Emeritus at the University of BC Theatre Department and a cultural legend in his own lifetime. He knows all the secrets about the theatre, about the academic communities, about the cultural communities, and he's going to share some of them now. Norman.
When I got in today, Max said he'd cut my time from whatever it was down to this. So I'm not going to tell you anything about the community. I will tell you that you know where you are on a vaudeville bill when you follow the tap dancers. I think that the sign of this full, no, that's no slur on tap dancers. Alex and Mackenzie are charming young ladies and very talented, and I like them very much. I was thinking when I saw the full house that David would be a little mad about this. David would have envisioned a parade down George's. Ending probably in BC Place, where 54,000 people would watch his life on the big screen. I know him. I knew David very well, but not for a while, and visited him many times, and liked him very much. But David was probably the most arrogant, opinionated, self-centered, mediocre mind, small-wit person I have ever met. And as a kindred spirit, we got on I'm going to take the few minutes I have to tell you a little story about David at university. I came to an opening class in Theatre 350, a little garbage pail class we put together for people who, in other faculties, who had to take in third or fourth year an outside course. And there were very few of them available for them, so we got a tremendous attendance in this class. A little cash for the theatre department. I came in the first class one year, and sitting in the front row is David. I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "I'm registered in the course." I said, "No, you're not." But I went and checked, and he was registered. I couldn't understand how. I don't think he got out of first year. It was kind of amazing. But I made a deal with him. I said, "David, go away. I mean, I know I'm not going to see you for the rest of the year anyway. So go away and do all the stuff you're doing. And at the end of the year, I'll give you a private exam, and if you pass it, I may consider giving you credit for the course." So that happened. He turned up. And the exam was 2 questions. One was describe the duties of the stage manager. David said, as his answer, "Well, they shout quiet a lot and know something about something called the prompt book." And actually, that describes them pretty well. Just in case you didn't know. The second question was a little more complicated. It said, describe 10 of the 19 devices of Pollux. So he knew 3 of them, which surprised me immensely, except that they relate to his life. The 19 devices of Pollux, for the 1 or 2 people here who don't know about them, are all of the Greek devices, the devices used in the Greek theater that are still used today in various forms, but still used. One that he answered was the ekaklima. The ekaklima was a platform they rolled out, and on it, in tableau, or sometimes, occasionally a little action, they described events that were taking place off stage. So they could tell the story. Instead of the telephone messenger or anything else, they would do it that way. And I thought that's pretty akin to David's life when I was thinking about it a while ago. David wanted to know everything that was happening on stage, in the audience, backstage, in the dressing rooms, in the residences of the actors who were working for him. He had a great thirst for that lovely sort of gossip. In fact, it was afforded. The second answer he gave was to periactoi. Well, we see periactoi every day in the billboards, the 3-pronged triangular billboards that change for 3 ads. Periactoi were pivoting triangles placed on each side of the stage, and they could do scenes on them to describe what the situation was. I thought, well, that sort of indicated that David had many more than 3 faces. David had a great deal of faces. Some of us, much to our chagrin, have known some that we'd never wanted to see, but he was still David. And incidentally, about the H.Y. and the Y.H. Louis, etc., I told him right up, "I'm Prince and you're Varlet." He loved it. We never called each other that, but he loved it. I always called him you. It seemed to work out. I see it, it's here. All right, I'm going to take time out from David to tell you a little theater story. When Monty Python came through years ago, they ended their tour here, and they had a vaudeville hook. It was actually a shepherd's staff hook, maybe 15 feet high and a big crook in it. And when they left, because it was the last show, they just left it in the theater. So it was around the theater for a long time, many, many years. And then Eric Idle came through, and he saw it there, And he said, that's our thing. So I made up a bill for him at Stern Rental that they owed us $20,000 for storing this. And I put the little note on his desk in the dressing room. And he took the hook and never paid. I was like, sorry about that break, David. But you're like, all I can say about David is that I think in what he did for the arts, for audiences, that was the key thing to me, is that he brought things for people to see. He brought things for the audience, for his own personal pleasure as well, of course, but for the audience. And I always admired him. I want you to know that Bill mentioned the Richards, what turned out to be Richards and Richards, the David Y.H. Louis Theater. It actually wasn't a storefront. It was a two-story, clear span building, absolutely suitable for putting a theater space in, which is why David did it. It was designed, the theater itself and the stage were designed by Richard Kent Wilcox, and Sid Kozak really engineered the whole thing of getting it started for David. Then he did these wonderful shows, but they were shows that David liked. And not as a criticism of David, I would never do that. But sometimes the general public didn't agree with David, which meant that a lot of them didn't turn up. Anyway, I'm very sorry that David is gone, and I think that anything we can do for him, even if we've done that parade, but this, what we have here, is just wonderful that you people have turned up to honor David and what he did. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Norman. David told me once that when he started in the business of being a theatrical impresario, he thought he'd never succeed because he wasn't Jewish. Then one day he received a letter from an agent in New York addressed to David Y.H. Levy. And he knew he was on his way. In fact, David was all about bridging the cultural divides in this city. I remember him telling me back in the 1970s that his family was delighted that he had, in his words, broken the color bar in this business. But really, he said to me, I'm about as Chinese as you are. And I thought that was a revealing moment. This was a man who embraced and exemplified the unique cultural makeup of Vancouver and was able to serve it in his own special way. Here's a brief clip of David talking about this city's diversity.
We have to start redefining the word mainstream, because mainstream in the past has always been about Eurocentric, because that's the people that were here before. But clearly, you know, with the policies of the last 25 years in this country, there are a lot of other people here, and thank God, I mean, because this is a really interesting place.
So you can see that David wasn't all about show business. He was all about community, about building a sense of who we are. And here to give us an insight into that is, I'd like to welcome David's friend, John Festinger. John.
The television business has been famously characterized, notably by Hunter S. Thompson, as a pretty cruel place. I won't read you the quote, but some of you will probably know it. Into the world of creating a new television station came David. He came along with a few others to be a director of Vancouver Television. There was a twist, of course, there always was. When the two Eastern broadcasters who co-owned the station decided to merge, and for reasons best understood by tax accountants in Toronto, The board that David was to be part of no longer existed. Of course, an advisory group was to be established in its stead, and it was hoped that the previous directors would join. In the not altogether happy circumstances, only David did join. A few years later, after David and I had developed a strong relationship, I finally got up the courage to ask him why he stayed. He'd been no happier than anyone else with what happened. Without missing a beat, David, who by that time was a fabulous chair of the advisory group, said, "You can't make anything better from the outside." Better, much better, he did make us. He was instrumental in creating and supporting VTV. He challenged us to be stronger culturally. And I guess I should say he knew an awful lot more about popular television than most of you probably think he did. He inspired us, he poked us, he prodded us, he annoyed us occasionally, he consistently energized us, was infinitely loyal, and always left us wanting more. And he still does leave us wanting more. Thank you, David.
Thank you, John. You see what I mean about the scope of David's range and of interest and influence. Here he's talking about the creation of another great city institution that is all about community building, the Dragon Boat Festival.
The festival has really focused for me, I guess, my relationship to my own personal my heritage, which for many years I never dealt with, I never understood. It's made me understand how important that heritage is to me and why it makes me the way I am.
Another friend who can shed light on the depth of David's involvement in the community is Sam Carter, another lifelong friend of David. He was involved with him with the Dragon Boat, and another icon in our community, Professor Emeritus at Emily Carr University of Art and Design, where he's taught for the last 4 decades, an all-round cultural spark plug. Sam Carter.
We were asked to create the Canadian International Dragon Boat Festival. Milton Wong, David Lamb, and David Y.H. were certainly central to the bringing together of this nonprofit cultural event that continues to this day. David was always concerned with making sure that people were working together, that they were integrated, that we didn't create the kind of ghettos that we associate with past planning and past cultural development. And to this day, the legacy of David, the Dragon Boat Festival, the countless numbers of performing arts groups that have visited the city have really contributed to making Vancouver that gateway to Asia and Pacific and the rest of the world. Probably one of the most enjoyable and one of the funniest stories I have to tell about David was we were invited by the cultural minister of Sichuan, who presented this beautiful mass to us when he was here in Vancouver. And he invited David and I to go to China. It was David's first trip to China. And we were welcomed at the airport, and we were, the tour guide asked us who we were and to tell us what country we were from, what nationality we were. And we went around in the circle, Sam Carter from Vancouver, Canada, I'm Canadian, and we went to Josephina Schmidt, I'm Josephina, I'm here from Germany, etc. My nationality is German, and went around in the circle, and for some reason David wasn't asked. So David stepped forward and said, "Oh, you didn't ask me." And the tour guide said, "Well, that's because we know you're Chinese." And he stood up, said fast, and he says, "I am not Chinese, I am a Canadian." Very David Y.H. Louis.
This is a palace wire. I noticed that Jean Orr made the reference to wire.
His name is Ma Wu. He comes from ancient lineage and is probably one of those spirits that's floating around like a dharma in the clouds right over us in Vancouver today, like David should be and is, I'm positive. It's just been such a delight and such a treat to be part of David's life for the last 40 years. As a matter of fact, we met right here in this studio about 40 years ago. And Leon did your September and all of that. And I think it's September and it's October and the tears are coming out in the audience. Brilliant performances, thank you. And I just thought of all of the things that David really has contributed to the spirit of this place. I am thinking of so many things. The time that I came with my drawing students, I came from Vancouver, from Toronto, where I was at the Ontario College of Art, and I moved here to teach at the then Vancouver School of Art, today's Emily Carr University of Art and Design on Granville Island. And I brought a group of drawing students into the Queen Elizabeth, and he said, well, what are you doing? Who are you anyway? And I said, well, I'm Sam Carter. I just moved here from Toronto, and my job is to get drawing students engaged in the culture. And I said, I was taught as a younger person to come in and we draw from the ballet and the theater and the opera. And it's just part of what we do in the visual arts. And he said, this is the living arts, representing the dead arts. And I said, I beg your pardon, Mr. Whoever the hell you call yourself these days. And I was quite miffed. And he says, if there's a significance of you being here, what is it? And I said, well, just think of all the posters, think of all the images, think of all of the visual spectacle that accommodate, or that goes along with your productions, and how that reaches the public. And I said, maybe that's what makes art, so-called dead art, as lively as your living art. So, you know, every dinner, countless dinners, being a very excellent chef, by the way, and a person who was sort of like the Pearl Nestus of the cultural reality of Vancouver. He would have these soirees and salons and wonderful dinners. How do we ever thank him for all these great things? Well, to keep going and to make it quick, our lives just continue to cross paths, whether it be parades and ceremonies for Expo 86 or the beginnings of the Canadian International Dragon Boat Festival, where I served as art director under David. And we organized great exhibitions, dragons from around the world. These exhibits traveled around the world and really, I think, contributed to the spirit of this place. I can remember the week before we left, David's very good friend Arthur Erickson had been to China with Pierre Elliott Trudeau way before Nixon went. And he was really there to kind of give us some guidance. This was in the very late 80s, early 90s, I can't remember the exact date. And it was still a very strange place to people that hadn't been there. And in subsequent years, I look back and I think of what a wonderful pleasure it was to be a part of his life and to be a part of his spirit and the spirit that he sort of has passed on to you here in this theater that has really made Vancouver the magical destination for so many people around the world and so many in the future who will continue to support ballet, dance, performance, opera, and the dead arts. Anyway, David, I love you.
Thank you, Sam. You know, Sam called David a gadabout. He might have been that, but he also had his practical side.
Well, I mean, if I were starting this all over again, I would continue with all my philosophical business about the arts and all, because I believe the artistic is the driving force, but I'd make sure I found one hell of an accountant.
Well, maybe so, but, you know, he was, as Peter told us earlier on, he was certainly skilled in getting people to join him as angels, as investors in his ventures. And he developed a real skill in the area of presenting, obviously, over the years. And here to give us an insight into those skills is Leela Getz. Leela is now the director of the highly renowned Vancouver Recital Society, which exposes the city to the same kinds of established and emerging artists that David used to bring us in dance. But for Leela, it all began with David. Leela.
I would like to begin by saying three things that aren't scripted. First of all, what a privilege it is for us all to be gathered here today. Secondly, would that this afternoon could go on forever. It is so extraordinarily special. And the final thing is, now I can go to the washroom soon. In 1974, I semi-lied my way into a job at David Y.H. Productions. I'd requested a meeting with him to ask him if he was ever going to bring the still then relatively little-known pianists, Marta Argerich and Maurizio Pollini, to Vancouver. He told me that he needed to make money and they were not sufficiently on the radar to sell tickets. This was 1974. Not the answer that I wanted. I nevertheless said to him when I left that if ever he needed volunteers to lick stamps and address envelopes or turn pages or whatever, I would be available. Here's where the truth comes in. A few days later, he called and asked me if I could type. This was 1974, and I had taken a typing course in London at a school called Sight and Sound on Oxford Street in 1967. And I had not touched a typewriter since. Does everyone know what a typewriter is? My response was, yes, I have learned to type. And he said, good, because I'm looking for a receptionist and I need someone now. I accepted the job, and I didn't tell him I was pregnant, because it was still the early days. In the 5 months that I worked for him, I had a tremendous education. I worked long hours because I was such an inadequate typist and had to redo and redo letters. I had learned to type on a manual typewriter, and the typewriter he gave me was an IBM Selectrix, a completely different animal. He dictated all the letters into a dictaphone, and each time I made a mistake, I would stamp my foot, and his words would fast forward, making it sound like Donald Duck in a panic. Remarkably, I lasted 5 months, because David didn't suffer fools gladly. He was bright, he was suave, he was quick, and a brilliantly talented producer and presenter. He was a true visionary and had the courage of his convictions. He made a real impact upon the cultural life of this city. He had a large ego, but as long as one worked around it, everything was fine. He was passionate and committed, and he had good taste. And I thought he had good judgment, until he asked me when I was 7 months pregnant to vacuum the office. That was when I quit my job with David Y.H. I spent what was left over from my earnings on a Seiko watch from the Bay for my husband, and I still don't vacuum. However, my time with David inspired me to take my own risks and bring unknown musicians to Vancouver when I launched the Vancouver Recital Society in 1980. Why don't you come? David will remain in our memories always. And now I have the special pleasure of introducing a group that I was delighted to present to our audiences very early in its career as part of the Vancouver Recital Society's now defunct Summer Chamber Music Festival. This is the Borealis String Quartet, and they will perform Cafetina from Beethoven's String Quartet number 13, opus 130. Ladies and gentlemen, the Borealis String Quartet.
Sheila in for that profoundly beautiful piece of music, so appropriate for today. As you heard at the beginning, David played the violin as a young man. There's a violin right behind me on the bar sideboard. He played both at Kitsilano High School and in the Mussock Orchestra Pit. He loved to play old piano sheet music. In fact, here's a sample of David playing Indian love call.
And the very unserious side.
Fascination with the violin started at home, in the bosom of the family. And here to share some of his memories of those early days is David's brother, Philip.
I think I know which one is which. Yes, exactly. I very much want to say that I'm very moved and touched by everyone who organized this wonderful event and who contributed their great talents for David's life celebration, and by everyone coming here today to honor my brother David. On behalf of myself, my wife, Yiping, family, and extended family, I wish to express our deepest gratitude for making this possible. I know David would have been both pleased and proud, although he might have asked, when are they going to perform Verdi's Requiem? And he would have meant a complete performance with full orchestra and chorus. David's legacy lies within all of us here today. For me, personally, David's spirit and love of the arts is present every time I write or play a piece of music, or I'm touched by a callous recording of Puccini or a cheering recording of the Bach Chaconne. Or when I leave my day-to-day existence to hear or see some live theater or live performance and experience something magical that touches the soul in a way that only a live performance shared with a live audience can produce. David encouraged me always and everyone to support the arts because the arts transcend and make our lives deeper just as it made his life deeper. David wasn't an artist or a musician, but his palette, his harmony, his canvas was the people he knew, touched and inspired and brought together to make things happen. Many were those countless dreams that he brought to life in his lifetime, and those dreams touch hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. While many of you knew my brother through his public events and the persona that he brought to Vancouver's cultural life, which we've heard so much about today, as contrast, I thought I would share some of my personal experiences of what it was like to have David Y.H. as an older brother. When my brother was born, my father named, and I know we spoke of this earlier about David's mysterious name, when my father named David Luyan He, which means the center of the universe. And yes, I will confirm that. It is absolutely true. And I think that pretty much sums up my brother's story. My father told me that David, I mean, this is before I appeared on the scene, David was a handful. My parents would often embarrassingly have to flee restaurants. And often there was mayhem in the kitchen, especially when my parents had to go somewhere for some important appointments. So in order to harness this strange force of the universe, my father was constantly seeking some counterforce to contain David. That's when I appeared on the scene. But of course, I wasn't much good for counterbalancing David at the beginning. Oh, incidentally, when my father named me, guess what name he gave me? It was Lo Yun Fu, which means helper to the center of the universe. This this was to become a source of conflict for me as we grew up and we came of age. A few years later, my father picked up the paper one day and read an article that said, "There is a shortage of violinists." That's it, and soon enough, my brother and I were trundled. And here, although this wasn't the original violin, actually I do have one of the original violins in David's apartment, but this became the beginning of our story with the violin, the beloved violin. And soon enough, we were trundled off to violin lessons, where we studied with the same teacher and played in the same string orchestra. David practiced, but he had problems. He couldn't keep rhythm, and he struggled with intonation. Around this time, it wasn't long before I started getting exposure to a pantheon of culture. My brother started collecting recordings, and when I was 8 or 9 years old, I was listening and experiencing music such as Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture, the Violin Concerto, and his great sweeping symphonies. We would listen to Tchaikovsky endlessly. As kids, I remember bouncing on the bed while we played the 1812 Overture turned up really loud, with the cannons roaring and the bells pealing. The recording was conducted by Morton Gould, who I was to meet years later. I remember it was pretty exciting and still love this piece to this day. Then David would take me to concerts where we would seek autographs. We heard Glenn Gould play Bach and Stravinsky conduct his Firebird Suite with the Vancouver Symphony. I came within a hair's breadth of getting Stravinsky's autograph, but he looked so frail I didn't want to disturb him. I remember seeing Fontaine and Nuria perform at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre, all thanks to David. It wasn't until years later that I realized that I'd been in the presence of some of the century's greatest artists. I treasure those memories always. And it wasn't just music, there was theater too. One day, David started assembling and hammering 2x4s in the basement. Mind you, this is one of the few times I saw my brother do anything physical or sports. So when I asked him what he was building, he just shrugged and said, "You'll see." David's project turned out to be a stage, a model stage with working sets that you could change with a system of pulleys. It had figurines dressed with costumes and different sets with castles and forests. I don't recall if it's opera, theater, or dance, but knowing David, it was probably all three. All my cousins and my friend Sean remember it well. One time, one of the cousins started to play with it when David wasn't around. When he found out, he was beside himself. I think that cousin didn't set foot near his theater for months. As I entered my college years, I was beginning a journey of becoming a composer. Leaving rather suddenly to New York, I ended up at Juilliard studying composition. And then after graduating, and a tremendous amount of work and maneuvering, my wife, Ping, and I founded a computer software company. Before and around this time, David was about to hit his stride as an impresario and was thriving in Vancouver. I thought this quite a distance. But more than once, David's presence still found its way to me in New York, thousands of miles away. I recall one memorable personal encounter that illustrates this, which I'd like to share with you all. Life in New York was really intense. As part of my survival strategy living and working ridiculous hours in New York, I became a tennis fanatic and used to show up in Central Park trying to pick up tennis games. One day I met someone and we played. Afterwards we got to the usual, what do you do, line of questioning. I told him I'm a composer who's writing computer software programs. I think that intrigued him. He introduced himself as Terry Orr, and said that he was a ballet master at ABT, and his wife was a principal ballerina at American Ballet Theatre. Going home, I told Ping the story. Ping didn't think this that unusual, as on the tennis court, I was always meeting different people that ranged from Navy jet pilots, musicians, Broadway and TV actors, restaurant cooks, and a spectrum of other colorful New York characters. A few weeks later, Terry, his wife, and I arranged to have dinner together along with Ping. Terry introduced us to his wife, Mariana Tchaikovsky. During dinner, Mariana suddenly asked me, "Philip Louis Vancouver? By any chance, is your brother David Y.H. Louis?" And I replied, "Why, yes, he is. How do you know him?" She proceeded to tell us that David had not that long ago arranged a tour on the West Coast with herself and other soloists from other dance companies, which was very successful. We were all pretty amazed about the coincidence. So even on the tennis court, David somehow found a way to communicate with me via some wonderful artist. We had a splendid time, and David's presence could be felt the entire evening. David was surprised and pleased when I told him the story. Now we arrived to my last story, which for me is the closure of an open circle. Once again, it involves the violin. It was about 2 years ago when something wonderful happened to me personally, and I wanted to share this experience with David. By a combination of chance, a mysterious personal internal force, and raw willpower and determination, I started playing the violin again after many, and I mean many years of silence. Decades, in fact, of silence. My wife, Payne, didn't even know I had played the violin and was shocked and somewhat dismayed when I began to practice. Painfully, incessantly. It all started one innocuous day in New York in the subway. A man who was playing the violin at the subway station who turned to the audience and asked, would anyone like to try? And I said, sure, why not? So I noodled a few notes, which actually didn't sound all that bad, surprisingly. So a couple of weeks later, I was searching for my fiddle, and with a screwdriver, I pried the case from the shelf because it was stuck. The violin sounded really, really awful, but I had it fixed, and it was pretty passable. It wasn't long before I became obsessed with the great Bach D minor chaconne. It was a painful struggle, and to those who know the violin is absolutely unforgiving. Payne banished me to the bathroom to practice, where I spent every spare hour struggling to climb this insurmountable musical mountain. But I persevered, and in the process managed to stay married, and within about 8 months, I had memorized the work and soon gave several performances of the chaconne along with presentations of its history and background. And if you're ever in New York, come and visit me. I will give you this. And in our home, for many friends and friends of friends. These were joyous and enlightening events for me, and I was excited to tell David about them. So I called David and I said, David, guess what? I'm playing the violin again. And he asked what music I was playing, and I replied, different movements from the Bach unaccompanied, including the Bach chaconne. He was very surprised, but I also detected a little skepticism in his voice. Although David's response wasn't typical when he responded with, well, you were always better than I was at the violin. You see, David seldom admitted that I was better than him about anything. After reaching this personal milestone with the Bach and the violin, I very much wanted to play for David, but hesitated. Should I play over the telephone? Should I make a recording? What should I do? But wait. Sadly, it's now become a regretful missed opportunity. So here I am on the stage with my violin, and on this day of David's celebration. So David, this is for you, a little bit of Bach. David, I would have played the chaconne here for you today, but let's save that for the upcoming blustery, windy, sunny days, fall days in New York with the windows wide open. Instead, I've chosen this intimate, beautiful, lyrical Bach Largo movement from the C major sonata as my farewell. David, I will miss you greatly. I will miss your unique humor, your funny, memorable phrases like the Callis quote, "You have no taste, get some." I will miss helping you solve your computer problems. I will miss your wisdom, your passions, the snippets of gossip, your quirky obsessions, those fixations that actually strangely became interesting. Your insights are long, orthogonal conversations about family, the arts, the state of the world, and writing music. Goodbye, dear David, dear Dave, David Y.H, my dear brother.
follow Philip would be to be with someone who I consider as perhaps someone who's going to walk in David's footsteps. He's a young man who I met. He was one that David brought back to my dressing room and has, from that day, gone into the arts. He's a company manager. He was working on a project with David. We were talking the other day as he picked me up from the airport about how many of us today here knew David from a very professional point of view. And one of the things about this next person who's going to speak is that he knew him on a very personal level. And he's one of David's very best friends, and his name is Brent Belcher.
The reason why we placed Brent in this position is because we've had these wonderfully moving moments with the Borealis and with Philip, and we felt that David was probably not ready to go out on a melancholy note. He's always about planning, he's always about the future, and Brent's going to talk about that too. Brent.
I met David in 1994. I just moved back to Vancouver and I'd been living abroad, and he was the one that introduced me to the world of dance. It was the last presentation that David had done, company for him, and it was an incredible thing for him to also to be able to meet Alicia Alonso. The company was in Montreal in February of last year, and David flew to Montreal with his cape. And he was there for the 3 days, and he got to meet the company, got to spend time with Alicia Alonso, and for with him coming home, I was afraid. His health was always a little shaky, and I was afraid just getting him there and back, but he did it. And for him, it was like a personal highlight of his life. And right now, I just want to share with you some words from Alicia Alonso from Madrid.
I remember that I met David in February, but I seen him before. He was in a performance. He was a tremendous admirer of Ballet de Cuba, and he said when we performed there, he talked about the ballet and the performance we did, and he was very much in love with the company and with my work. He admired me very much, so he said, and it means he was extremely genuine to everyone. He made a beautiful speech talking about their dancing, their work, and then after we had a shot, we talked about his dream was to bring the company to Canada for a tour. He wanted, that was one of his dreams. He had many dreams and he always made them. But this one, he wanted to make it as one of his most wonderful dreams for him. To make the Ballet Nacional de Cuba have a tour in Canada, to be his impresario. We will always remember him. And our tour will be dedicated to this wonderful lover of art and culture.
It's my hope with the successful shows that are going to happen in February that I'll be able to launch a fund in David's name and be able to support the arts in a financial way that wasn't maybe one of the things. He was always the idea person, but never so much the money side of things. And I think it would be such a great legacy if that could happen. So that's one of the things And with that, for a moment of shameless commercialism, and I'm sure that David would endorse this himself, a little clip of the performance of what will be here in February.
Thank you, Brent, and thanks for that reminder that we are in a commercial world. Thank you all for being part of this wonderful send-off for this remarkable man. You've sat through a show that is longer than most operas and longer than most ballets. David would have been delighted. If you'd like to record your own comments and reminiscences about David, we have a video camera in the upstairs lobby, and we encourage you to do that because you can put your own memories, your own personal David on that camera, and that'll be added to our archive, and it'll be up on the David website and on YouTube.
And just before we go, I'd like to say thank you so much to the organizing committee. Backstage and all the volunteers, all the performers, everyone, and of course you for coming. Thank you so much.
Perhaps the best way we can actually mark David's memory, serve his memory, is by doing what he spent his life being passionate about, by supporting every aspect of the arts, not just shows, but every aspect of the arts and education and culture as an essential element of the lives we share together, and to reinforce that support in a practical way by buying tickets to shows like that.
And I guess the last thing I want to say is that I feel Maggie came off stage and said, you know, it's such a special audience out there, isn't it? And I said, yes, it's one that's filled with love. And I think that's the best thing that we can do is continue to love the arts and think of David every once in a while.
Thanks to all our performers and presenters for making this such a warm and celebratory afternoon. I haven't heard so much laughter in the theatre for ages. It's been wonderful. And now here are Leon, Jane Waterfeet, Pat Rose, and Ruth to do one last number from Brad.
Followed by David, of course, who has to have the last word.
If we only have love. think in general, there are probably three areas of legacy. One, I like to hope that I created a dance audience in Vancouver and set the stage for the growth of dance that comes from within the community. By bringing all those companies, I helped to create an appetite for dance of all kinds and all sorts. And in those halcyon days, I guess you call them, every company that toured North America had come to Vancouver. And in those 15 years, you saw everything from New York City Ballet to the Royal Winnipeg to the National to Twyla's Hart to Martha Graham, everybody. I hear from a lot of dancers who are dancing now, you know, they hear my name and they say, "Oh, you're the guy who brought all those companies in." Well, you're the reason that I'm dancing now, because I went to see those companies and I fell in love with the ballet or modern, and as a result, I was inspired to take this as a career. To me, that's a wonderful legacy, to be able to say what you did. The second part of the legacy, I think, is that I fought very hard for the cultural community in Vancouver and was very outspoken to all levels of government and funders and everybody about, maybe too outspoken, but certainly I would call a spade or call a spade a kettle or whatever it was it got called. And I believed a great deal in the artists and their ability to create art and to create industry around that art, and continue to fight for that today. The other part is the creative part, where I, in fact, came up with the idea of the cultural program of the Dragon Boat Festival. I created the model program, original model program for the World Festival at Expo 86. I recreated a ballet company called Ballet British Columbia based on the ashes of several companies that had happened before its time. And, you know, the company continues to this day to carry on. So I helped to create the foundations of an institution or a cultural, part of our cultural milieu in Vancouver. I think the next part of my legacy will be two-pronged. One aspect will be to help continue to develop facilities in Vancouver culture, and also to create a funding mechanism or an institutional mechanism to assist young, talented artists at the crucial point of their career, which is between learning the basics and graduating from their conservatories or whatever program they graduate from and going into a more professional school. The artists are the key to the future, and the kids are the key to the future. And we mustn't forget that culture, I mean, that music and art and drawing and painting and all of those things are not frills in our school system, which they've been treated like up to this point, but are really actually complementary to the development of mathematicians and great thinking. And it's been proven time and time again that all these fine arts programs actually contribute immeasurably to the development of the child and education. And why we're so far behind on this, I have no idea other than stupidity. So I'd like to make us less stupid for the next 20 years of my life.